Welcome, everyone. I'm Kristen Hipwell, the Director of Product Marketing with Perfection Learning, and I'm excited to have each of you joining us for tonight's AP Language Post-Exam Happy Hour. Before we get started, there are just two quick items I want to go over. One, when you have comments or questions during the webinar, and that's the whole point of tonight's webinar, is to have questions and comments, please be sure to post them in the chat section at the bottom of your screen. And two, Perfection Learning will be sending out an email tomorrow with both the webinar recording and the slide deck that's being used. It is now my pleasure to introduce our expert teacher for this evening. Dr. Brandon Abdon comes to us with over 20 years of experience in the classroom, including 12 years as a high school English teacher, as well as time as a professor of English and education, as a curriculum developer, and as an instructional coach. In addition to his time in the classroom, Brandon formerly worked as the Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment for AP English at the College Board, and he has more than 10 years of experience as a College Board consultant. But our favorite credential on Brandon's resume is as senior author of Perfection Learning's AP Literature and AP Language course books by AMSCO. Brandon, thank you so much for being here to facilitate tonight's session, and I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And I want to welcome everyone for being here. I got so many notes from people when this went out on social media, when this went out on Twitter and across emails, that they would love to be able to come, but they've already left for vacation or they've already started doing this, and totally understand. So glad that people have already left in some cases for vacation. I know many people are still in school. I got one note from a person who tomorrow is their last day of school. And so I understand completely how that sort of stuff goes too. So thank you all so much for being here. This is really to celebrate you and celebrate your students and what you did this year for them, what they were able to accomplish. And my goal here was really to get the opportunity, to give the opportunity for you all to share some of those stories that made your year feel so successful. And we're going to give some stuff away too. So I always love doing that. And as a teacher myself, I always love getting free things. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. So welcome, and I'd like everybody to go ahead and find the chat, please. And in that chat, go ahead and drop your name, your location, and I want to know one thing you plan to do this summer for yourself, please, something you're going to do for yourself. All right, so let's take a few minutes of silence. Go ahead and drop that in the chat for us. All right, I dropped mine in there too. You'll see my name. I'm located in Owensboro, Kentucky. And this summer, I plan on doing lots of fishing, as I do every summer. And I want to start golfing with my son. He's very interested in golf. I've never golfed, so we'll see what's up. All right, so I see Sarah dropping hers in there. Thank you, Sarah, coming at us from Northern New Jersey, going down an EF tour. That's great. Jaterica at Santa Fe Catholic. All right. You're going to get some rest. Well-deserved, no doubt. All right. A couple of other things coming in here. Keith's going to be celebrating his birthday in Oregon. Very nice. All right. Emily's going to sleep as much as she can. I think I already touched on that. All right. Shannon, lots of books to read. Good, Shannon. I hope you're able to enjoy them. I've got a couple books on my list too. So Vanessa's going to Sweden. Wow, that's awesome. Courtney's in Rhode Island. Read for fun by the pool. Good for you with that reading for fun, Courtney. I love it. Lori she's still in school. Let's see. I'm going to the beach in 17 days. Okay, Lori, I see you're going to the beach in 17 days. Yeah. All right. And it's almost 16, right? Okay, great. So take a moment. You can kind of scan through. Oh, Mark, I'm excited for you going to Glacier National Park. It's a beautiful site, beautiful spot. You'll just love it. Um, all right, everybody. Nice to see everybody making some plans. Hopefully we'll get some rest and we'll do some other things in there too. So that's great. Oh, your fourth trip, Mark. So you've been there. You've been to Glacier National Park. It's beautiful. Good for you. All right. So I said just a moment ago that this is all about you. And so I really want to focus on your year and the things that you've accomplished and the things that your students have accomplished. So I've got several questions here. And, I'm a national writing project person. I like asking people to write and get their ideas on paper, but you don't have to write right now. If you want to write it, great. If you just want to think through each of these, that would be so helpful. And I'm going to give you 3 minutes on the screen here of silent thinking time. And I really want you to think through how you will respond to these, because I'm going to be asking you all to put these in the chat. I'm going to be taking you all off of mute and asking you all to share. We want to hear some of these things. So I want to know number one here, what is your greatest success this year? Some of these questions might overlap, and that's fine. Number two, the student who got it this year. All right, tell us about that light bulb moment. You might have multiple. Try to think about that one. That would be great to see. When a kid wowed you, something a kid said, something a kid did. Again, it might be related to one of the other questions. It might be your greatest success and the student who got it. Maybe it's all the same student. Your favorite lesson or activity this year. Yeah, go ahead and share, what it was. It doesn't have to be something huge, long, some great big long project. It might have been one day in February, that lesson that just clicked for you and for everybody. We'd love to hear about it. And then your colleagues are probably going to want more details about it because they want to do it next year. The thing you wish you could go back and do again. And you said you're thinking, Brandon, you told us this is about celebrating us, but here you're asking us to reflect and think about changing something. Well, I want you to feel positive about this, because this is your opportunity to take something that you'd like to do again and realize, hey, I do get to do it again next year. Or maybe you won't do it again because you just don't feel like there's any hope in it. Yeah, we'll just think about that. And then number 6, the most hopeful moment. A kid who struggled but didn't quit. A kid who wasn't supposed to be an AP but worked at it. Any of those. All right. So go ahead. I see some people have already dropped something in the chat. You don't have to do that yet. I would just like you all to take about 3 minutes and think through these. If you want to write them, that's fine. And we're going to go question by question and just kind of talk. And in between questions, we'll give some stuff away, and we'll get to have some laughs. We'll get to give some snaps and feel real good about the things that our colleagues are doing around the country and around the world. So I'm going to go on mute. I've got your timer on the screen. You've got 3 minutes of thinking to do, starting now. All right, everyone. Hopefully you got a chance to think through these and you know what you want to share and you're excited to share because you should be excited to share. You should be excited to tell us and kind of celebrate all the things that your students have done this year. So let's go ahead, and I would like to start with Brandy Detweiler. And she went ahead and dropped something in the chat before. She was so excited about it, she was able to drop it in before we got going. And so, Brandy, I want to go ahead and invite you to come off mute and tell us about this situation. Tell us about this, about what happened with this warm and fuzzy feeling.
Hi, I did not actually mean to post that.
That's okay.
I was typing my thoughts in the meantime and I accidentally hit return. But yeah, so I do not remember the lesson, which I think is kind of the important part, is that it was more about like the feeling I got when the student had that epiphany that she finally understood something. It was a student who works really hard and is pretty introspective and a little quiet sometimes. And it was just a really sweet moment. It made me feel good. And I told her about it, how like, that's kind of what you live for. So.
Yeah. Great. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And it's fine if you made that mistake. It was just meant that you get to share it with us, right?
All right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. So thanks a lot, Brandy.
Sure.
So I want to start with your greatest success. So if everybody could go ahead and drop in the chat, what is your greatest success from this year? And I'd love you to go ahead and drop it in the chat. Just a couple words. It might be a little bit longer if you want to. That'd be fine with me. All right, we got a couple dropped in. We got some people who dropped their whole list in, and that's fantastic too. We'll be able to come back to those. All right, so lots of great ones coming in here. I want to go ahead and start, though. I'd like to hear from Tirza. Tirza Kahan, and I hope I've said that correctly. Probably not, and I apologize. You can correct me when you come off mute.
I have a lot of students who are used to repeating what the teacher says. And that's not what AP is about. AP is about learning how to think and organize your thoughts. And I spent a lot of time on motivating them, making them read newspapers, challenging them to look at the world in a different way. And every time they thought they were getting me on topic, they were really getting me on topic because they had to talk. And I didn't talk. I let them talk to each other and prod them.
So you said every time they thought they were getting you off topic, it was your way of baiting them into talking and sharing.
Giving them an overview of the world because they know nothing.
Yeah.
They're not sure when the Civil War is. They're not sure. One kid said the Civil War happened after World War II. They don't remember which president came when to go ahead for support for their essays. And I made them really understand timelines are important, ideas are important, and they talk to each other as opposed to talking to me. And I just look at them and they fight, they learn from each other that way.
Nice. And so I really like that you shared that. And thank you so much, because that's really thinking about our role in the classroom as a teacher and as a facilitator, not as a lecturer or as a person who is supposed to be doing things for them. And so I love it. And I know a lot of us are doing those things. When I say doing those things, I mean teaching and facilitating. So thank you so much for sharing that, Tirza. And did I say your name correctly? Just to make sure.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Score one for me.
It's an Old Testament name named after my grandmother.
It's a beautiful name. And that might be my greatest success, is getting your name right on the first try. So thank you.
Good for you.
I appreciate it.
My teachers never did.
Well, score for me. Right. Okay, great. Thank you. So Shannon, Thomas, I'd really like to hear about you having to work with this single student. You should be able to take yourself off of mute, Shannon.
Can you hear me?
I can. Go for it.
Okay. So in my division, there was a school that wasn't offering AP Lang, and the student was transferring to their school and needed to take the class for 9 weeks so that he could shift over to Virtual Virginia at the end of the semester. Virtual Virginia wouldn't let him in until the semester change. And so I was basically asked if I would teach him virtually, and I didn't really want to, and I tried to say no, but they wouldn't let me say no. And it turned out to be a really positive experience. He was a great student. He was very, very motivated and very much willing to do whatever it took to help himself be successful virtually. And my students loved having him join our class. And we had a cute little webcam that my students dressed up and gave him a name. He kind of looked like Wally. So they named him Walter, and it was just a really good experience overall. And it sort of changed my mindset about not really wanting to do virtual in combination with in person.
Wow. And so, it says a lot, Shannon, that you took on that challenge and that you also now feel like it was one of your greatest successes or the greatest success of the year. Something I'll talk about at the end. I'm always pushing people to remember that we should be risk takers and mistake makers. And it sounds like, you took a risk, or you were told you had to take a risk rather. And then I'm sure you made some mistakes. I'm sure there's something that could have gone differently with the teaching, but you did it. And I'm so glad that you feel like it was so successful. That's great. There's so many, thank you, Shannon. There's so many others here that I'd love to hear from. Hopefully you all are looking through them and seeing some of the things that your colleagues are celebrating. But the last one I want to stop with here is Sarah Kuzo. And we've got, I like to think about AP teachers and all the things that AP teachers are doing in their school and in their classroom so often. And so, here Sarah's talking about leading to untrained teachers through the courses, and then the year going really well for all three of you. So Sarah, we'd love to hear how you did that. And I'm sure there's some people in the room who'd love to pick your brain about it too. You should be able to unmute yourself, Sarah.
Okay, I figured it out. Thank you so
Great.
much.
No problem. Thank you.
So it was my first year teaching AP Lang too. We had 2 Lang teachers in our building, but they both left for greener pastures at the same time. So I was kind of ready to go in the chamber. And then I was given 2 people who they didn't have an APSI, they had nothing. So we all figured it out together. And I look back and I think about all the things that we did, and I'm just super proud of us. We used a lot of the materials that the previous teachers had left, but we fixed them up and we made some things our own, and we got through the year.
I love it. And the idea of making things your own. We don't want a curriculum to be teacher proof, right? Because
Exactly.
we know teachers have personalities and teachers know their context in their classrooms. But we also know we've got to follow certain parts. And so the fact that you all made that, you took it, made it your own, and felt so successful with it. That's awesome. So let me ask you this, Sarah, putting you on the spot.
Okay.
When those scores come out in July and those 2 teachers are beating themselves up, what's the first thing you think you're going to say to them?
I think we're going to identify areas of weakness and think about how we can regroup and do it better next year. And we did our best with the resources that we had. We were all put in a tough spot, and our kids learned. They left that classroom better readers and writers, more critical thinkers, and we have to take that as the win instead of the score.
I love it. I love it. They may not be beating themselves up. They may look at those scores and say like, yes, look what we got. Fantastic. But there's always that one kid or two kids that we think they're going to do something they don't, and we want to internalize that. And so it sounds like they definitely have a mentor in you to help them guide that kind of situation. So fantastic.
Thank you so much.
And Sarah, I just found out that you are the first winner for the evening.
Oh my
So,
God.
since you're unmute, I did not know that when I asked you to unmute, but now I know it. And so you will, my colleague will reach out to you, I believe is how it's going to work. And you will get a free set of AMSCO AP course books for your class. So
They'll be put to good use. Thank you so much.
good. And if there's anything I can do or we can do, please be in touch. Let us know. Great. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. We've got some more giveaways coming up here, y'all, in just a moment, but I want to move on as far as questions go. Let's look at the student who got it this year. I want to share mine while you all type yours in. The student who got it and Sarah, would you mind going ahead and muting yourself again, please? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you. The student, for me, this story will always be the student who had never taken an AP class, got to her senior year, decided in the last minute to sign up to take her counselor's advice and do an AP class, only because she'd had me in the previous year, and she and I had pushed her to do it. And she came in never having taken an AP class, found out pretty quickly that she could hang with the other kids as far as the level of the work and the classroom setting, but she struggled in her writing. She'd never really been taught how to articulate complex thinking in writing. And so she kept working at it, and she would revise and she would rework things constantly. And I remember around the 1st of December, when she had this moment, she wrote her first in-class essay that she got what would be a qualifying score on it, didn't have to revise it or rewrite it. She was in tears. And it was that moment, that essay, where things really clicked for her. And I'll never forget it. And she ended up graduating and going to a 2-year college for pre-nursing, and then went into nursing school, and she's a nurse today. And so great for her. Really excited for her to have done that. And this was a couple years ago, but that's the one that always stands out to me as a student who got it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you all have shared here. And I want to point out that Sarah, there's a note to you as a winner. I'll look for an email from Ashley at Perfection in the next few days for information about how you'll get your books. All right. So Clifton, you're the first one to post here specifically about the student who got it. So of course I'm going to put you on the spot. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear from you. Tell us about the student, or maybe 2 or 3 total.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hey, Brandon, I took your APSI about 12 years ago in Western Kentucky. Love it.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Still
Awesome.
use it today.
Good. I'm actually going back to Western Kentucky later on. Let's see, in about 3 weeks, I'll be there, and I'm really excited to get to do that. So thanks for coming.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I had a student, super smart in several AP classes, and was just kind of nervous about using her knowledge. She had so much. And we talked about what does it take to get the sophistication point. And in addition to writing style, I said, just putting things in context, taking the passage and rhetorical analysis, putting it in context, bringing in that outside knowledge, or in any of the essays. And she was just nervous about it because very few students in the class could do it. She was self-conscious about it. But then, about mid-year, she realized, like, yeah, this is the sophistication point right here, when she could put all those passages in context and bring in her outside knowledge, even in the synthesis question, and just it was crushing it. And I'm hoping, she's setting herself up for a 5 this year.
That's fantastic. And what I really like hearing about that is, I hear people say, oh, well, the sophistication point, I hear consultants say sometimes, not a lot of them, but the consultants say, well, you can't teach it. You just get it. Well, no, you absolutely can teach those things. And we made sure you could when we redid the rubric and pulled samples for it. I mean, we made sure that, hey, these are not je ne sais quoi. These are tangible things that I can put my finger on and say, hey, the consistency of this throughout the essay is what's going to make the difference. And that's what you're talking about here, Clifton. I love it. And so you said you may have had more than just that one student. It may have been a couple of students who were doing that.
Yeah, I'd about two to three, maybe. I taught 3 sections of AP Lang, and there was about 1 or maybe 2 per class sometimes. And they were just, they felt self-conscious about it, but I tried to encourage it, and hopefully the other students learned.
Great. And I think a lot of us encounter this nervousness about bringing in outside knowledge, often because students have been told that they aren't supposed to focus on their personal experiences when they write argument or when they write research and things. And that's really not so helpful. The idea that you can't use a personal voice in writing is probably what also does that to students sometimes. So, having that vertical teaming conversation with our colleagues at the levels below, freshman, sophomore, junior year, depending on where you're teaching it, may help with that, because kids they're afraid to bring in that personal information. Like, it's not enough. But also going back to what someone said just a moment ago, helping them learn the world is good too, because then they have other options from their reading and the news and things like that to bring in. So thank you, Clifton, for sharing that. I appreciate it. I'm looking at a couple others here. Give me just a moment. So Vanessa, I think Vanessa Hauling, I believe is what it is. I think, Vanessa, you are touching on something we just kind of touched on a moment ago. And I'd love to hear you tell us a little bit more about this student, this male student who got it. So if you want to take yourself off mute, that'd be great.
Hi there.
Hi, Vanessa.
I was waiting for that button that said unmute.
I know. Yeah. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah. This is a kid who he was really quiet by nature, and he struggled with writing, really struggled with writing. And in fact, he was that kid that, in September, I was looking at his first submissions, and I'd be like, oh boy, okay, I've got some work cut out for me here. But when I spoke to him, it became so clear that this kid knew a lot of things. He was like a tech nerd. He knew everything about technology. He knew a lot about history. He had read some things that other kids hadn't even read. His writing was just, not stellar. But I think once he realized, and it took a little bit of time for sure, but by the time we got to May and he had written, a lot of argumentative essays and was able to use and really pull together a lot of the information that we had worked on over the year, his writing just started to just soar. And it's pretty, something that I've always done is I have them keep their essays. I keep their first submission and I just hide it away. And right before the AP exam and when they do their last essay, I always, after they've turned in their last one, I always give them back the first one. And it's funny because most of the time the kids will just laugh. They'll be like, oh my God, I wrote this. And I'm like, yep, you did.
Yeah.
And I think the one thing that I love about Lang is that whoever said, teach them the world, that's exactly what I feel like we are trying to do. But that's the one thing I think Lang celebrates, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And striking that balance to a yes and to what you're saying, striking that balance between teaching them the world and helping them recognize that their own experiences are enough. And it's their own experiences, their own knowledge are enough. And it's hard because so many times, especially as children, these students have been told that they don't know enough, or they don't have, or what they've done doesn't matter. And we can't do that to people. I mean, there's no faster way to tell a kid, let a kid know that an AP classroom is not for them than to do that. So balancing that, here are some things in the world that we can learn versus with the idea that, hey, you've had a lot of experiences. You're not dumb. You made it this far. You've got some things you can draw on, and that stuff's really, really important. And so I'm glad to hear you all navigating that. I see several people who have talked about that, different pieces of evidence with question 3. Fantastic. So Vanessa, thank you for letting me call you out.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you're doing with your students. Before we move on to our next question, y'all, I do have our next winner. This person is going to get their choice of a classroom set of nonfiction text from Perfection Learning's library. And Perfection has a large library text. And so you'll get a contact from Perfection here in a couple of days, and they'll let you know what you got to do. But that person randomly drawn is Emily Lovely. So Emily, congratulations. My colleague, like I said, will reach out to you, and she will share some information with you that will allow you to choose your classroom set of nonfiction texts for AP language. So there you go. All right, everybody. We've got when a kid wowed you, or your favorite lesson or activity this year. You can, because of time, you can take your pick here. So choose one of these and drop in what you'd like to share with us. A kid that wowed you, and some of you may have already talked about the kid that wowed you, and that's fine. Or your favorite lesson or activity this year. We'll take just a moment and see what everybody has to say. Okay, so I'm not even going to wait. I know a lot of y'all are typing. You're going to put in different things you're thinking. You know, you're probably thinking you've got 3 or 4. Which one are you going to choose? Put them all in there. There's no rules here. But I'm going to start with Jaterica. And I hope, Jaterica, I'm saying your name correctly. Please correct me if I'm not. But Jaterica, if you could take yourself off of mute and tell us a little bit more about this mock trial. You know, who'd you put on trial? Etc. I want to learn more. I'm very curious.
Yes, and yes, you said my name correctly. The lesson that we did, we read through the novel Frankenstein, of course, and to help my students with the argumentative process, we started really evaluating and really analyzing who was truly at fault, who was the real monster in the situation. Because we always talk about how people don't realize that Frankenstein is the doctor, not the scientist, not the monster itself. And so for all of those murders, we put Frankenstein on trial. And my students went through the whole judicial process. We learned about different court scenes. We watched mock trials from other states. My students dressed up and they used all of their objections. They used all of their rulings, all of those different things. And they brought in a lot of evidence, a lot of analysis, a lot of writing material to prosecute and defend the monster. And in some classes, the monster got off free and was just suggested to get some therapy. And in other classes, he was considered guilty because they felt that he still knew right from wrong, even though he did come from a horrible situation. So it was just very interesting to see their personalities come through this mock trial, to see their perspectives, and to see how so many different things could be taken away from the same novel that everyone was reading. So it was really cool. And my students loved it. They still talk about it until, you know, even now, sometimes I'll get emails about it. And that was near the beginning of the year, the first semester.
That's outstanding. And I love the connection. You know, you teach in the fiction, but hey, I've got to connect this to AP language. How am I going to do it? You found something that the kids were really invested in. They wanted to work with it. And it wasn't just a debate. There were more stakes to it here because of the trial setting. And so thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think there's probably a lot of people making some notes right now because they want to be able to do something similar themselves. So thank you for sharing that. Love it. Another kind of connection to something outside of the classroom. Courtney, you did a Shark Tank competition. I want to learn more about this, and so does everybody else in the room. So Courtney, can you tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. So I did it at the end of the year, and I had the kids create products, kind of, whatever product they wanted to create. We had some interesting choices. So, and obviously they had to do a little bit of research. They had to look and see what similar products that might exist, that like what the cost would be and things like that. But what it really came down to is that they had to create a presentation and then sell it to I had 4 teachers come in as guest sharks. And one of them was pretty brutal in her questioning. Do you have FDA approval? What does the EPA think of this? And the first few kids were kind of like, I don't know how to answer this. And then I felt bad for them, but as the other kids kind of caught on, I don't necessarily know that this is the greatest thing because they kind of were lying through their teeth a little bit, but they quickly learned how to answer these questions and be responsive to kind of get ahead of those questions. So give the information beforehand so they weren't kind of caught without really.
Oh no, I think we lost her. Courtney, did we lose you?
Oh, yeah, I'm back.
Okay, great.
Yeah, we had some wild things that they tried to create, color changing shoes and sunblock that only has to be applied once, and skim boards that were surfboards with that, and skateboards that all became something with a push of a button. So not necessarily things that could actually happen, but it was fun.
Right. And that bit of creativity is something that's fun to engage with them there too. So that's great. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Really, really nice way, similar to the trial, of getting them engaged in the content while they're also up and thinking and involved a little bit more. So great. And one other one here that is focusing on, when a kid wowed you. Jill Jacoby Burns, and I hope it's either Jacoby Burns or Jacoby Burns. But Jill, thank you for sharing this about working on the college essays. It's something I did as well when I was full-time in the classroom and teaching juniors. But what I really like about this is it's the kid who we know is capable and we know is smart, but there's other things going on in her life that may mean that she can't show everything she can do on the regular basis. So Jill, can you share a little bit more about the student that you talk about here?
Yeah, absolutely. She's always been I guess we'll say, I had her last year too for honors English too. And so I knew she had some difficulty at home and wasn't living with her parents. But she's always been super motivated. Like if she got a 97, she wanted to know how to get 100. Even if she couldn't resubmit, she would ask the question, like, how do I have to do it? But this year she's had a really hard time, especially in the spring semester with attendance. She's had a lot of things going on, and she turned her college essay in late. I read it actually just this morning, and I burst into tears. It was just so beautiful how she wrote it. Not just the situation that she was in, which was also heart-wrenching in itself, but I mean, I was thinking, look, she put in, look at her rhetorical choices. It's so cheesy to say, but I was really amazed by the structure that she chose to put it in, and the patterns of her sentences, and just it was stunning. It was stunning, and I'm just really.
I mean, that's outstanding, and I love the fact that you were so invested in it. It brings you to tears to recognize what the student's capable of, and especially like I said, for a student, and like you said, for a student who traditional school might not be the best setting for him or her. And so that the student has struggled a little bit because of family situation or what have you. So I love celebrating those kinds of kids. And that's also why I like teaching creative writing so much, because that was often a place where a lot of those kids could thrive. So,
Yeah, I
one
love, I
final
love
thing, go ahead.
the narrative. I was just gonna say, I love being able to include that narrative piece, to squeeze in at the end of the year. I think it takes a little bit of pressure off for them in a way, even though they're writing it for a real reason. And
Yeah.
we get to see them as different people.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you again for adding that. I completely agree. Yes. So before we move on here, Brandy has a question, and I'm going to ask Lori to answer it because I'm kind of wondering too. I can't quite place what Alligator River is. And so Lori, would you come off mute and kind of tell us what's up?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I used Alligator River with an argument unit, and it has just this little small short story that you read aloud to the children about a particular thing that happens between a couple of characters trying to get across Alligator River. And at some point, each character does something that's immoral or wrong in some way, but then the children have to pick who was the best person and who was the worst person in the story. And the debates got heated. I mean, absolutely heated. But in addition to that, their lines of reasoning were incredible. So in the end, we had to vote, who was the best character and who was the worst in the Alligator River scenario. But I was just blown away by how well they were able to defend their person that they chose as the best or the worst character in the story, because they really put a lot of thought into creating that strong line of reasoning, which is what I wanted them to do, in their future essays.
Great idea. I know exactly what you're talking about now. Because I Googled it as well. And with your description, I was like, yes, okay. I've heard there are things like this have existed for a while. This is just the latest iteration of it. But I love this. And so I posted a link to the one at Oakland University there for everyone to access. But yeah, I do something like this in my APSIs for AP literature and language. But the fact that you're linking it directly to line of reasoning, thank you. Because it's not just about the argument and the claim. It's about how they're using their reasoning, their logic to justify the things they're saying in that claim. And so thank you, Lori, for coming off. You helped Brandy and everybody else too. So awesome. Okay, so we have another winner. And this winner, and these are being drawn at random by my colleague. But this winner is a $50 Amazon gift card. And my colleague will reach out to you in a couple of days. And the winner of that one is Jaterica. So good for you, Jaterica. You're going to get an $50 Amazon gift card to buy yourself something to have some fun over the summer with, some books or, whatever tickles your fancy there, maybe something to take to a beach. So good for you. Good for you. Yeah. All right. So the last things I want to ask for here as we push towards time. We only have 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure we can get to this, and then any questions you all have or anything like that. I'd like to hear the thing you wish you could go back and do again. What's that thing you worked so hard on this lesson, or either kids really needed this and it just didn't go the way you needed it to go, or the most hopeful moment. Some of you guys may have already talked about some of those. Thank you. If not, what's that most hopeful moment? The kid who struggled but didn't quit, the kid who wasn't supposed to be an AP but worked at it. Maybe it's a kid who you taught a couple of years ago and they reached out to you this year to tell you, hey, and this happened to me as a teacher, this kid was a real problem, struggled behaviorally and academically. They were in AP. They didn't want to do the work, but they wanted to be treated a certain way, and they a little bit entitled. And I didn't bend on them. And then their junior year of college, they came back to visit me, and they thanked me for pushing them. And there were other teachers too that they talked to, but thanked me for pushing them. And because they said they struggled a lot their first and second semester of college, because they thought they could just do things and get by with it. They thought they could just do the work and it not be good and turn it in. And they realized that the stuff that I had been pushing, and that, two particular other teachers that their senior year had been pushing, was trying to prepare them to do, not just get the work done, but to do the work better. And so that really gave me some hope and I think about that often when I know a kid is really upset with me, or my own children are upset with me, and think, okay, in a year or two down the road, or 10 years down the road, it's going to matter. There's hope for that. So I see some answers coming in here. So Mark, I wish I should have spent more time hand-holding in the rhetorical situation and exegesis at the beginning of each new text. So Mark, I'm going to ask you to come off mute and tell me why. Why do you think that's so important at the beginning of each new text?
Well, I think oftentimes students almost think that these texts fell out of the sky, or have always existed. And I think that by really slowing down and showing that each text is a response to something in the world, I think it will really, it's gonna help them, just give them more of an entry point into the text. And I just felt that I kind of rushed it a little bit, on all of them. And because there's just so many great texts to use.
Yeah.
And so you're wanting to dive into the actual text ASAP. And I realized, I really got to just slow down. What is the trigger? What is the cause? What is the soil that this text is growing out of?
Yeah, Mark, I really appreciate you saying that. My graduate work was on Richard Wright in his context. And so, to say context matters, I mean, you're barking at my tree. But one of the things we sometimes forget, and I say we because I mean me too, is that when we want to read something, we have a context awareness. It's rare that I just pick something up and want to read it cold. I've usually heard about it, or I've heard something about it, or I'm reading the back covers like, oh, this is really interesting to me, this subject or this time period or whatever. When we're assigning books to kids, they don't often have that. And so helping to establish that for them is really important. And this is a great opportunity. We don't have to lecture around it, y'all. We can bring in some videos from YouTube. We can bring in some short readings online. If your students are taking AP US history or any US history or any history at all, while they're also taking your language course, you can bring in some primary documents. I mean, your history teacher loved that. So think about those sorts of things. But I'm so glad Mark thinks about that. And giving kids something to sink their teeth into with the text when they first start it. I mean, I got a great example, just happens to be sitting on my desk here. It's fiction. It's called Take My Hand. But the context is Montgomery, Alabama in 1973. And this brand new nurse is slowly learning about the clinic she's working at is sterilizing the poor and the women of color. And so, I'm really interested in that space. And so I had a context for it. And so I was able to get into the narrative a little bit more quickly than a person who doesn't have that kind of context. So thanks, Mark. That's excellent for the language course and the literature course. I appreciate you sharing that. Adria, I want to hear some of the things that your students said to next year's students.
One of the last things, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Absolutely.
Right. One of the last things I asked them to do is to write letters to the incoming students for next year. And I just want to see how they felt about the year, which is typically what they share. But the things that their writing has gotten so much better that they'll start out with these huge words that I can just imagine entering first-time AP students reading and saying, oh my goodness. And then they become very personal and they're like, you're going to do amazing in this class. There's so many opportunities for you to learn skills that you'll use the rest of your life. And so by the time it's done, it's for me, it's just been such an awesome opportunity for me to see that, yes, the light bulb did turn on with each and every student in a different place. And some of them are looking at it for writing better in college, and others are looking at it for writing better in the work field. Others are looking better, like they'll sign their name and put their email. Hey, call me if you have a problem and I'll be happy to sit down and talk through this with you. So I've just seen so many positive things come from it.
That is fantastic. That you see your students not only sharing information that next year's kids are going to need, but that they are wanting to be accountable to it, sharing their information so that somebody can reach out to them. I think that's really showing that the environment that you have helped to foster in your classroom. So I appreciate them doing that. I appreciate you sharing that. So thanks so much, Adria. I've got so many of you dropping things in here that it would be great to hear from. One thing I want to respond to, one of you saying in here that you wish you had more time to confer with kids. I always wish I had more time to confer. It didn't matter if I had 10 kids in the class or 30 kids in the class. I wanted to have more time to sit down with small groups. When I say small groups, I mean 2 or 3 or individuals. And so one of the things I really encourage people, and I'm actually doing a workshop on this next week in Santa Ana, California, is when you're creating this writing world in your classroom, that conferring can be 2 or 3 students who all have similar needs. As you get to know them, as you read their writing, you can confer with 2 or 3 of them. If you've created that trusting atmosphere, I'd be happy to talk more about that. You can reach out to me. I'll give you my contact information at the end. What I don't want, a trap that I really worry about English teachers getting sucked into is the idea of feeling like you have to give more written feedback. Y'all, there ain't time for that. There's a chart somewhere. I tweeted it. You can look it up, but it's not mine originally. But if you've got 60 students and you spend 5 minutes on every essay, well, you do the math, quick teacher math, right? I think that's 300 minutes. Okay, and so you do that and figure it up, and you think, well, if you've got big classes and you've got more than 60 students, so sometimes that you're not going to be able to give all that feedback. So think about how you can look for patterns in what students are doing and then group them into small groups, 2 or 3, and you confer with those 2 or 3 kids. Or if you notice that, hey, not just 2 or 3, but of my 30 kids or my 60 kids, 50 of them are struggling with this, or 40 of them are struggling with this. Well, that's a classroom lesson. That's something I need to do with the whole class. Because given that feedback, y'all, I'm telling you, most of them aren't going to read it. And you're going to find yourself giving you're going to find yourself giving the same feedback over and over and over again. So I know you guys are being thoughtful about that, but that's the number one thing that I see English teachers decide that they're going to leave the classroom for, and it's because of the paperwork. And so how do we work smarter, not harder? And so feel free to reach out. That can be such a frightening thing, such a scary thing. So thanks for sharing that, you all. And thanks for being open to that. All right. So before we kind of push to wrap up, I've got, let's see, Brandy shares. Brandy had 96 AP Lang students this semester, and the paperwork felt insurmountable. Yep, I understand, y'all. It's tough, but I mean, I worked through it my APSIs too. So you're welcome to reach out to me. It doesn't have to be an APSI. Drop me an email. I do phone calls with teachers all the time. There's at least 2 people in this session that I've talked to on the phone on a Google Meet in the last couple of weeks who've reached out to me about things. So they can tell you, I'm happy to do it. Happy to just help people strategize with stuff because it's tough. I totally understand. And you're welcome. All right, you almost, we push towards the end here. I've got one more giveaway to make, and I will do that here in just a moment. first, a little shameless promotion here. If you haven't checked out the AMSCO course books, please check them out. They were written with lots of love and lots of work, and I had some great partners to work on them with. Tim Freitas and Lauren Peterson working specifically on the language one. We loved it. And it looks like Jill said she's going to be at my AP. Oh yeah, you're going to be with us in Raleigh. Raleigh is going to be a good time. Meredith College. We're going to have a good time there. I've got several people that are coming that I know. And so I'm glad you're going to be there too, Jill. Thank you. But you can check these out on Perfection Learning's website. Full disclosure, I don't make any royalties on these. I've been paid out. And so it's not like I'm pushing books so I can get paid. I'm pushing books because I believe in the work that's been done. And I know that these things can matter in classrooms. I also really buy into the mission of Perfection Learning. That's to put quality materials in teachers and students' hands for reasonable or even below reasonable prices. So yeah. And Lee, thanks for the shout out. I appreciate it. I owe you an email. I'll make sure to get it to you. Don't worry. Also, some of our partners here, some of you are familiar with the Garden of English. We're doing some workshops this summer through Garden of English. You see the way this is laid out here. I don't do the language ones for Garden of English. I do language a lot, but Tim Freitas does the language ones for Garden of English. I do the lit ones. If you want to use this coupon, you can get $100 off if you decide you want to do that AP workshop. Also, Applied Practice. Applied Practice is a great group that I've been doing some work with, kind of partnering with us, and they're sponsoring some of this too. And that's the giveaway I'm going to make here in just a moment. But Applied Practice is also providing mock exams as a service, and they give data feedback and everything else. That's something that's really, really valuable. If you have more questions, you can reach out to me about it. But if you're interested in it, you can take this and you'll get this PowerPoint tomorrow or the next day, close. You can save 10% on the mock exams in your classroom with this code. So you may want to make sure to note that. And again, it's a mock exam. It is read by real AP readers that contract with us to do the reading. We get feedback on it, and you also get data, actionable data in the weeks or month or two before the exam, so you know what you need to target. And it's really great work. And you also, everyone here can get 50% off right now. If you want to go and look at some of the guides on Applied Practice, we have guides for AP Language, guide for AP Literature. The AP Language guide we just came out with is one called is one about modern speeches. We just finished one and are getting ready to go to publication with it about wartime speeches too. So you can check those out on the Applied Practice website using this code. But I'm going to give away an Applied Practice guide now. And so you're going to want this person will want to email me at the email address that's on the last slide. And I will make sure to put you in touch with my colleague at Applied Practice so that she can give you what you need to get your free guide. And I want to make sure this person is still here. I'm looking. No, that person has left. So we're going to have to draw another name here. So can you give me another name, please, Ashley? She's drawing. All right. And the winner is Adria. So Adria, you will get a free guide from Applied Practice of your choosing. You'll need to email me about that, and I'll make sure to connect you with my colleague at Applied Practice. I'll give you my email address in just a second, Adria. Reminder to everyone, we are risk takers and mistake makers. This is what I like to remind students and teachers. My AP workshops this summer, these are the ones I'm doing on language and literature. You can check them out when you get the copy of the PowerPoint. These are links. And finally, I'm sorry, and my email is right here, brandon.abdon@gmail.com. Please feel free to contact me. And with that, I will say, please do the survey that Kristen's going to talk about in just a second. please be in touch. Thanks so much, everyone. Enjoy your summer. Kristen?
Thank you, Brandon, and everybody else who contributed to the discussion for your insights this evening. All winners that were announced during tonight's session will be notified by email. We'll even follow up with that last winner just to make sure that they don't have to reach out to us to get them the information. We'll use the email you registered with, and then we'll coordinate delivery of the materials that you won. Just as a reminder, we will be sending out an email tomorrow with the recording of tonight's webinar and the slide deck that was used. If you're attending our next happy hour that's focused on AP Lit, that starts at 7:15 Eastern, and you will need to exit this webinar and log into the link that you were provided for that particular session. But before you do that, two things. First of all, in the email that you receive tomorrow with follow-up, there will be a link to a survey. It's a 1-question survey that we really hope you complete. It simply asks, what other AP Lang topics would you like to see covered in future webinars? And we look at that information and use that information to tailor the topics that we cover. So please take the time to fill that out. Also, if you want to learn more from Brandon, please take the time to subscribe to the Next Step blog from Perfection Learning. That is available at nextstep.perfectionlearning.com. There you will find recordings of Brandon's past webinars, blog posts, as well as lesson plans. Thank
Kristen,
you
I've got
everyone
one
for
thing,
joining
one
us.
thing,
Go ahead.
one thing.
Yep.
We haven't put this out yet, but I'm going to tell everybody here, they're the first ones to know that the webinar at the end of June is going to have Duku Inokie, the chief reader for AP Language, talking about the reading. She won't be able to talk about results, but she'll be able to talk about the reading, talk about the essays, things like that. She will be our guest. And so look for that email to come across. We're super excited that she's going to do this, and she's a dear friend of mine. So,
yep. So watch for that information. The best way to guarantee that you get that information is to sign up for that Next Step blog, because then you will be on the list that we send an email out to saying, be sure you attend this session, right? Thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and enjoy your summer break.